My name is Lon Allen, and I'm on the board of directors of KCAT Channel 15, which is our community television station here in Monte Sereno.
Welcome to Coffee&Candidates.
The upcoming election is very important as 3 of the 5 council seats are open. To help us understand the issues, Dr. Larry Gerston, a political analyst with a nationwide reputation, will be interviewing the candidates. Dr. Gerston will ask the candidates about the issues that will be before the council the next 4 years. Please listen carefully so you could determine which candidates have a vision that mirrors your own. As a former mayor of Monte Sereno, I can tell you that it is very important that we have a city council that reflects the values of our community. Lastly, I'd like to encourage you to let us know whether our community television station is meeting your needs. We have a very short 3-question survey on our website, kcat.org, so please go up and let us know how we are serving this community of Monte Sereno. Thank you very much.
Hey there, I'm hosting Coffee and the Candidates this morning at the KCAT studios. Want to see what it's all about? Come on in. Hi everybody.
Hi Larry.
Good to see you. I love my coffee. And thank you, Cafeteria, for providing this coffee throughout this series of Coffee and the Candidates. Well, welcome to this wonderful series, Coffee and Candidates on KCAT, brought to you by KCAT and Los Gatos Community Foundation. I'm Larry Gerston. I'm your host for this series, and it's an opportunity for us to discuss the issues with the candidates both in Los Gatos and in Monte Sereno. A couple of elections coming up. You may be thinking of the big ones, but these are very big to the people who live in these 2 towns. So because of that, KCAT and the town of Monte Sereno and Los Gatos, and again, the Los Gatos Foundation, Community Foundation, have made this available. So it's a wonderful opportunity for us to get to know the candidates. Today we're meeting with Evert Wolsheimer, who's been in the Valley a long time. I mean, you know, you weren't born here, but you might as well have been. You started in the Valley, what, about 35, 40 years ago?
1982.
1982.
My wife and our first child and I moved to the Valley from the Netherlands.
Yes?
Yeah.
And you worked for a string of Valley companies, right?
I did. I worked for, among others, Philips, LSI Logic, Xilinx, Summit. And after I retired, I moved on to the nonprofit world where I spent some time at several very, very great organizations, among others the YWCA of Silicon Valley.
YWCA, and you were on the board at the YWCA, and now you're on the advisory board.
I'm on the advisory board now, and while we're talking about that,
Yeah.
I'd like to briefly mention that they have their annual luncheon coming up on October 30th, and the guest speaker this year will be Anita Hill.
And we know something about her, okay. Yeah. And the event will be held where?
It's in the Santa Clara Convention Center.
And this is, without going on too long, this is the main fundraiser for the YWCA of Silicon Valley.
It is. It's an annual event, and it's, like you said, it's the main fundraiser. The organization gets a lot of funds from that event.
So it's fair to say that since you've retired, you've spent a good deal of your free time in philanthropy. Is that fair?
That is correct. Since I retired, I've been on the YWCA, and after that, or actually during that, I also started getting interested in city politics.
Which leads us to this discussion today. Thank you very much. And you were involved in a commission prior to your appointment to the town council in 2015, correct?
That's right. I joined the what Monte Sereno calls the Site and Architecture Commission. Los Gatos calls it the Planning Commission, and in 2010, and I served on that for 5 years.
And how long have you lived in Monte Sereno?
My family and I have lived in Monte Sereno since 2002. So
Okay.
16 years in beautiful Monte Sereno.
And it is that. And of course, keeping Monte Sereno beautiful in the way the townspeople want it has got to be a tough job. which leads us to some of the issues that are going on these days in Monte Sereno. I guess one of the ones that everybody's talking about is what's going on with what once was the hacienda, and the town's response to the state's demand that towns, not only Monte Sereno but others in the valley, including Los Gatos, come up with enough affordable housing. How's that all working out?
It's a very, very tough problem, not just for Monte Sereno, but for all cities in the Bay Area and in California for that matter. The state has recognized the problem and has come up with a certain number of what they call below market rate houses and multifamily houses that they want to have built in the state, and then they have a formula how they divide that number up by city. So it's a very straightforward calculation. But unfortunately, it puts some cities into a bind. For example, Monte Sereno, because it's completely built out. I'm very familiar with the city, and I know of two what we call underutilized lots that either don't have a house on it or have a very small house on it. So when the state came up with this plan, the city council then started working on it and immediately ran into a brick wall. There's no place to put these units. Now, fortunately for the below market rate units, we can use the so-called accessory dwelling units, or granny units as some people call them. So we've been able to satisfy the state's demand there, but then there was no place to put the multifamily houses that we needed to build.
Which leads us to the hacienda.
Leads us to the hacienda.
Okay.
The hacienda was not at that time within the city limits of Monte Sereno. But we worked with the owner of the hacienda, and the owner was very interested in being incorporated into the city. And as part of that plan, the plan is to build 15 multi-family units there, in addition to 21 single-family houses. So that satisfies the state up to 2023. And then it starts all over again. Then there'll be a number which we won't be able to meet. So it's a real tough problem.
Do you support this approach?
No.
You don't? So
I don't.
You didn't support it because?
One size fits all approach. For very small cities, Monte Sereno is one, Los Altos Hills is another one. It's almost impossible to meet these needs. So we're looking to work with other communities in other cities and form what are called sub-regions. Los Gatos might be one, Saratoga might be one. We might be able to work together with them.
Regionally.
And yeah, sub-regionally, right. And maybe even regionally. Right. But initially the state wants us to look sub-regionally, only work with immediately adjacent cities.
So some cities or towns that might have spare land could almost bank it for you, and your extra housing could be on their land, that kind of thing.
For example, or we would, in one form or another, sponsor a development in Saratoga or Los Gatos or another city.
Do you favor this sub-regional approach in the future?
I think it's the only way to make that work. We're not like Sunnyvale, for example. They have industrial areas that they can tear down, which they have done. They have an airport, the same as Mountain View, that had a lot of buildings around it, right, where they were able to build a lot of apartment buildings. Monte Sereno doesn't have that. So we have to work with other cities and towns to make this happen.
Why were you unhappy with Hacienda, with the change? What inconvenience does it bring?
The Hacienda, you mean?
Yeah,
it was
low-cost
somewhat
housing.
Controversial, that development. Until that point, Monte Sereno had only single-family dwellings, typically on larger lots. And to now build 36 units on 4.5 acres was a big jump in density for a city like Monte Sereno. But it was the only way we could do it. And I feel also that cities have a moral obligation to do this, because it's not just a legal obligation. There's a real issue with housing in the Bay Area, right, and cities need to do whatever they can, even if they need to adjust their rules and their feelings inside the city about these issues.
Okay, so you don't like it, but this is an eventuality, both in terms of the state coming down on the town, and also the reality that we have such a pressing housing need.
Yeah, there was a very excellent report issued by a civil grand jury of Santa Clara in Santa Clara County in June of this year. It's called Density is Our Destiny. And it has a lot of numbers in it, a lot of graphs, how the various cities perform in that area, the area of housing. Monte Sereno is not doing that bad. There are cities that are doing much worse. But that's a very good report, and I would recommend everybody who's interested in this issue to read that report.
Okay, let's go to a slightly different area here. There's so many people in Los Gatos and I think Monte Sereno get pretty excited in a negative way about the traffic that comes through every summer. You know, Highway 17 is flooded, so to speak, with cars. Folks get off on the side streets, they get clogged. I imagine Monte Sereno is impacted somewhat by what goes on Highway 9 and perhaps other streets nearby. Winchester, which gets very close, should be another one. What do you think ought to be done about that?
That's a very complex problem. I don't think it can be resolved by any single city or a combination of cities. It involves the county, Santa Clara County. It involves Caltrans. It involves the state also. And because of technology, it also involves companies like Google with their Waze app, which has triggered some of the anger of the people. And I actually took the initiative to contact one of the executives at Waze and had a very interesting phone conversation with that person. And I explained the problem to him and that this is happening every weekend, every summer. And he said, well, that's what we're here for. That's the problem we're solving.
For who?
So I told him, I think in this case you actually contributed to the problem. You're not solving it. And he said, well, what is the problem then? So I explained to him, well, people are on Highway 17. Waze says, go off the Highway 17, take Lark Avenue, or go the other way, cut through a smaller street. That street saturates, they go onto an even smaller street. So, and the executive said, well, that's exactly the kind of problem we're trying to solve. And so this went back and forth and I didn't get anywhere. And this has been the experience of a lot of people. They're hitting a brick wall. They're trying to convince these tech companies that they are actually creating a problem, not solving a problem. But the problem of Highway 17 is very complicated. There's no easy solution. I think one of the Los Gatos town council members said, it's here to stay. We have to learn to live with it, work around it, and I agree with him.
How do we work around it?
It sounds terrible, but planning your day. Don't plan on going into a busy street when it's full. Try to leave home earlier. Try to get back home later. It sounds like a terrible thing to do, but it's reality. It's reality we have to live with until we can come up with a solution with the state, with Caltrans, with Santa Clara County.
Some people have suggested the idea of perhaps taking that third lane from the exit area at Lark and just continuing it all the way down to Highway 9, which at least might dissipate the problem somewhat. What do you think about that?
That's one of the few discrete, tangible things we can do. I think Highway 17 goes from 3 lanes to 2 lanes to 3 lanes to 2 lanes. And that's where the bottleneck usually happens. Same thing happens in near Los Altos Hills on Highway 280, where it goes from 4 to 3, and then back to 4, and then back to 3. That's typically where the problems happen. So if we can somehow convince Caltrans to work on that. I'm not an expert on this, but I think there's room to make it 3 lanes all the way up to Highway 9.
And what do you think about adding more traffic lights to Highway 9 as a way of discouraging people from taking it because they're going to have to stop a lot more? Do you consider that as maybe a possibility to sort of discourage out-of-town traffic?
Sure. I think the experts call that traffic calming steps. That's certainly an issue. That may come up with the Hacienda development also. The speed limit there is around 45 miles per hour. And there may be a call to put in a traffic light right there.
So this is going to be the first election for you because you were appointed in
That's correct.
2015, right?
I was appointed in 2015 when one of the sitting city council members had to retire, and then the city has this procedure they go through to pick somebody else.
So I'm going to begin a sentence with you, and I'd like you to try to complete it. How's that?
Sure.
The most important reason for you to elect me is
experience and energy and the fact that I really, really enjoy living in Monte Sereno.
And once you're elected councilman, what would be your first goal? What's the one thing you want to try to get done that hasn't been done?
There are several. I'm not sure how they rank in order of importance, but certainly the housing issue is number 1 or 2 or 3. I don't want to wait until the end of if I get elected, I don't want to wait until the end of my second term, 2022, because the next cycle is coming up in 2023. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't wait until the last minute to get started on the next, because I don't know how many multifamily and below market rate units we have to build in that next period, but it's going to be very difficult. So we should start working now with adjacent cities. One of the other topics is I'd like our government to become even more open and easy to reach for people. There have been some complaints from residents. I've knocked on a lot of doors recently. One of the complaints that residents have is that the city sometimes distributes materials on Friday afternoon for a Tuesday city council meeting. And sometimes that even includes a holiday like Labor Day. And then people have no time to absorb the material, to give feedback to council members. And people complain about that. So I'm going to fight for more time in between publication of the material and the actual city council meeting.
To give the public the opportunity to respond, come up with counter arguments.
Participate, yeah.
Participate, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something that you think people have felt a bit distant on, that they haven't had enough opportunity to. It's such a small town. It's kind of interesting that feeling would be there.
It has come up significantly, especially when we were dealing with the hacienda.
Yeah.
More recently, the topic of potentially building a library in the small building next to the city hall has come up, and people were very disappointed that they had so little time to react to that. Okay. So that's definitely something that I will put my weight behind.
Evert Wolsheimer, running for his first full term on the Town Council in Monte Sereno. Thank you so much for coming and visiting with us this morning.
Thank you.
Happy to be with you. For the record, KCAT TV reached out to all the candidates running for Los Gatos Town Council and Monte Sereno City Council. Candidates Steve Leonardis and Ben McLean did not respond to our invitation.